I bet you didn't know how one man could change the course of Australian history forever. The wide, sunny plains of Australia in the 1800s seemed like a new beginning for many. People from Europe, hoping for gold and a fresh start, sailed to its shores. Among them were Irish families running away from hunger and hardship back home. The Kelly family from County Tipperary, Ireland, were part of this big move. They settled in the rough bushland of Victoria, hoping to make a living from the tough land. Born in 1854, Edward Ned Kelly came into a world filled with both hope and sadness. His dad, Red Kelly, struggled to care for his family, always fighting against poverty. Young Ned saw the unfairness of colonial life, the big difference between the rich landowners and the struggling settlers. Feelings of anger started early, growing strong in his young heart. Ned's run-ins with the police, even as a kid, involved claims of stealing and fighting, often because of prejudice and not real proof. As Ned Kelly grew up, his trouble with the law got worse. He was put in jail at 16 for stealing a horse, something he always said he didn't do. This made him tougher, making him believe the legal system was against people like him. After he got out, Ned's life was full of fights and resisting. Ned became known as a tough bushman and a strong fighter with every daring escape and fight. The tension between Ned Kelly and the police finally exploded at Stringy Bark Creek. In October 1878, police led by Sergeant Michael Kennedy camped in the thick bush, hoping to catch Kelly and his friends. Ned, his younger brother Dan, and their pals Joe Byrne and Steve Hart were camped nearby, knowing the police were there. A fight broke out, and 3 policemen were killed. The Stringy Bark Creek shootout shocked everyone in Victoria. Killing 3 policemen was a bold move, and it started a huge manhunt. Rewards were offered, search parties were formed, and newspapers were full of stories about the Kelly gang. Some people thought they were dangerous criminals. Others, especially the poor, saw them as heroes fighting against an unfair system. The Kelly gang became even bolder, directly challenging the government. They were incredibly good at hiding, using their knowledge of the bush to escape the police. They robbed banks in Victoria and New South Wales, appearing suddenly with masks on their faces. They often gave some of the stolen money to poor farmers, making some people see them like Robin Hood. The Kelly gang's actions captivated everyone. Newspapers printed exciting stories about their crimes, causing a big debate about who they really were. Many poor people, especially those from Ireland, saw them as challenging the powerful. They saw Ned Kelly as someone who understood their struggles and anger towards the authorities. The government, determined to stop them, spent lots of money trying to catch them, dead or alive. As the police closed in, the Kelly gang, knowing they might die, decided to make a final stand. They went to the small town of Glenrowan and took over the local hotel, holding the people inside hostage. Ned, always planning ahead, had gotten suits of armor made from plow parts, simple but strong protection against bullets. The siege at Glenrowan in June 1880 was a dramatic and bloody event. The gunshots at Stringy Bark Creek and the bank robberies made the Kelly gang famous. But Ned Kelly wanted more than just fame. While hiding in the Australian bush, Ned wrote what became known as the Geraldry Letter. This letter explained the unfairness that had hurt Ned and his people for a long time. He wrote about how the police treated his family badly, showing how the system was against the poor and the Irish. Ned's words were strong and honest. He wrote about the struggles of the selectors, those trying to make a living from the tough Australian land. He complained about the corruption he saw everywhere, from the local police to the government leaders. The Geraldry Letter was more than just his story, it was a call to action for those who were treated badly. He dreamed of a fair world where everyone was equal under the law. Ned gave the Geraldry Letter to a friend, a teacher named Joe Byrne, to give to the newspapers. But Byrne got scared and buried the letter. It was found months later and printed in newspapers everywhere. Even though it came from an outlaw, it became a very important document in Australian history. In the winter of 1880, the Kelly gang was being hunted. Ned Kelly, their leader, made a daring plan for a final stand that would make them famous in Australian history. They chose the small town of Glenrowan. The gang, smaller now after months of hiding, rode into Glenrowan on a Sunday morning. The people of Glenrowan were scared. The Kelly gang, the famous outlaws, were now in their town. Ned told the people they wouldn't be hurt if they cooperated. He said they were just part of a bigger fight against unfairness. As night came, the tension inside the Glenrowan Inn grew. The Kelly gang was ready for their last stand. They had been preparing for this moment for months, knowing that their time was running out. The law was closing in, and they needed to make a statement, one that would be remembered for generations. Their plan was bold, and their resolve was unshakable. They knew the risks, but they were determined to face them head-on. They had made suits of armor from plow parts, simple but good protection. Each piece was meticulously crafted, hammered into shape by their own hands. The process was grueling, but they believed it was worth it. The armor was not just a means of protection, it was a symbol of their defiance. It represented their refusal to be subdued by the authorities. The metal plates were heavy and cumbersome, but they gave the gang a sense of invincibility. They felt like medieval knights, ready to take on any challenge that came their way. These heavy suits made them look strong and ready to fight. The sight of the gang and their armor was intimidating. They looked like warriors from a bygone era, standing tall and resolute. The armor clanked and rattled with every movement, a constant reminder of the battle that lay ahead. The gang members exchanged glances, their eyes filled with determination. They knew that the armor would slow them down, but they were willing to accept that trade-off for the protection it offered. They were ready to face whatever came their way, no matter the cost. Ned's armor covered him completely. From head to toe, he was encased in metal, a human fortress. The helmet, with its narrow eye slit, gave him a limited view of the world, but it also made him feel invulnerable. The chest plate was thick and sturdy, capable of deflecting bullets. The leg guards and arm protectors added to his formidable appearance. Ned felt a surge of confidence as he donned the armor. He knew that he was about to make history, and he was ready to embrace his destiny. It was heavy, but it made him feel strong, like he could survive anything. The weight of the armor was a constant burden, but it also served as a reminder of his mission. Every step he took was a testament to his resolve. The gang members looked to Ned for leadership, and he was determined not to let them down. He knew that the coming battle would be fierce, but he was ready to face it with courage and determination. The armor was more than just a physical shield, it was a symbol of his unyielding spirit. As the sun came up, the Kelly gang stood around the inn, ready to fight. The dawn light cast long shadows, creating an eerie atmosphere. The gang members were tense, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the approaching police. They knew that the train carrying their adversaries would arrive soon, and they had to be prepared. The inn, which had been their refuge, was now their battleground. They took their positions, each man knowing his role in the upcoming confrontation. The air was thick with anticipation, and the silence was almost deafening. The train with the police was coming soon, and everyone's fate was uncertain. The sound of the train's whistle echoed through the valley, a harbinger of the impending clash. The gang members tightened their grips on their weapons, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that the police were well armed and determined to bring them to justice. The odds were against them, but they were resolved to fight to the end. The train drew closer, its wheels clattering on the tracks, a relentless march towards destiny. The gang members exchanged final glances, steeling themselves for the battle ahead. The sound of the train whistle made the hostages scared. The hostages, who had been caught in the middle of this conflict, were filled with fear. They huddled together, their faces pale and their eyes wide with terror. The whistle was a stark reminder of the danger that loomed. They prayed for a peaceful resolution, but deep down, they knew that violence was inevitable. The tension in the air was palpable, and every second felt like an eternity. The hostages could only hope that they would survive the ordeal unscathed. The Kelly gang members looked at each other, ready for what was about to happen. They had made their choice, and there was no turning back. Each man was prepared to lay down his life for the cause. Their eyes met, a silent exchange of solidarity and resolve. They knew that the coming hours would be the most challenging of their lives, but they were ready to face them together. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in the fires of adversity. As the train approached, they took a deep breath, bracing themselves for the inevitable clash. The stage was set, and the final act of their saga was about to unfold. The train stopped near the inn, warned by a brave schoolmaster who had escaped. The police, ready to catch the outlaws, spread out around the inn. The siege began. A big gunfight started. The Kelly gang in their armor seemed protected from the bullets. They shot back, knowing the land well. Ned Kelly, in his shining armor, looked unstoppable, but Ned was losing. As the day went on, things got worse for the gang. Dan Kelly and Steve Hart were killed inside the inn. Joe Byrne was shot and dying. Ned, hurt but still fighting, made a last stand outside. He ran at the police, shooting. But his luck ran out. He was shot in the legs and captured. The Kelly gang was over. Ned's trial was big news. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. On November 11, 1880, Ned Kelly was hanged. His last words were, "Such is life." The Kelly gang's story is still talked about today. Were they criminals or heroes? The debate continues, making sure Ned Kelly is remembered in Australian history. Ned Kelly's capture wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of another chapter in his tumultuous life. After his dramatic capture at Glenrowan, where he donned his infamous suit of armor, Ned Kelly was taken into custody. The image of him in chains became a symbol of defiance and resistance against the authorities. But for Ned, the battle was far from over. The story moved from the bush to the Melbourne jail. This grim and foreboding place would be the setting for the final act of his life. Melbourne jail, with its cold stone walls and iron bars, was a stark contrast to the open landscapes where Ned had roamed free. Here he was confined, awaiting his fate. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. The public's fascination with Ned Kelly was at an all-time high. People gathered in the streets, eagerly reading the latest newspaper articles about his capture and upcoming trial. The air was thick with anticipation and curiosity. The trial was a big event. It was held in a packed courtroom with spectators from all walks of life eager to witness the proceedings. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the trial began, with Ned Kelly at the center of it all, facing the charges against him. Newspapers wrote about everything that happened. Every detail of the trial was meticulously reported, from the testimonies of witnesses to the arguments of the lawyers. The public devoured these reports, forming their own opinions about the man who had become a legend in his own time. Ned was charged with murder, robbery, and resisting arrest. The charges were serious, and the evidence against him was substantial. The prosecution painted a picture of a ruthless outlaw, while the defense tried to portray him as a victim of circumstance. Ned stayed strong during the trial. Despite the overwhelming odds against him, he remained resolute and defiant. His demeanor in the courtroom was one of determination and unyielding spirit, a testament to his character. He said he was forced to do what he did because of how the police and rich landowners treated his people. In his defense, Ned spoke passionately about the injustices faced by his family and community. He argued that the actions he took were a response to the oppression and brutality inflicted upon them by the authorities. He said the system was unfair to the poor, forcing him and his gang to fight to survive, but no one listened. His words fell on deaf ears, as the court was more interested in upholding the law than understanding the root causes of his rebellion. The divide between the rich and the poor was stark, and Ned's plight was a reflection of the broader social issues of the time. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as justice served, while others viewed it as the tragic end of a folk hero. As Ned Kelly was led away, the shadow of the gallows loomed large, marking the end of an era and the beginning of his legend. On a cold November morning in 1880, Ned Kelly was hanged. The air was thick with anticipation and dread as the infamous outlaw faced his final moments. The crowd gathered, a mix of curiosity and somber reflection, to witness the end of a man who had become a symbol of both rebellion and criminality. The gallows stood tall, a stark reminder of the harsh justice of the time. As the noose tightened around his neck, Ned Kelly's life flashed before his eyes, a life marked by struggle, defiance, and a relentless pursuit of what he believed to be justice. He was only 25 years old, Yet, in his short life, he had managed to etch his name into the annals of Australian history. Born into a poor Irish immigrant family, Ned Kelly's early years were fraught with hardship. His father, a convict, died when Ned was just 12, leaving the family to fend for themselves in a harsh and unforgiving land. This early exposure to injustice and poverty shaped Ned's worldview, planting the seeds of rebellion that would later define his life. His last words were, "Such is life." These three simple words have since become legendary, encapsulating the stoic acceptance of his fate. But what did they really mean? Were they a resignation to the inevitable, or a defiant statement against the system that had condemned him? The ambiguity of his final utterance only adds to the mystique surrounding his character. It's a phrase that has been dissected and debated, much like the man himself. Ned Kelly's death didn't end people's interest in him. In fact, it only fueled the fire. Newspapers of the time were filled with stories and opinions about the man who had dared to stand up to the authorities. Some saw him as a hero, a Robin Hood figure who fought for the downtrodden. Others viewed him as nothing more than a ruthless criminal. This dichotomy of perception has persisted through the years, making Ned Kelly a subject of endless fascination and debate. People still debated whether he was a killer or a victim. Was he a product of his environment driven to crime by the injustices he faced? Or was he inherently violent, using his grievances as an excuse for his actions? The arguments are as varied as they are passionate, reflecting the complexity of his legacy. Historians, scholars, and enthusiasts continue to delve into the nuances of his life, each new discovery adding another layer to the intricate tapestry of his story. Even today, no one is sure. The passage of time has done little to clarify the enigma that is Ned Kelly. Modern historians sift through old documents, letters, and court records, trying to piece together a coherent narrative. Yet the more they uncover, the more questions arise. Was he a misunderstood rebel or a cold-blooded killer? The truth, it seems, lies somewhere in between, a murky middle ground that defies easy categorization. Ned Kelly is a famous figure in Australian stories. His image is immortalized in statues, paintings, and films, each portrayal adding to the mythos that surrounds him. He has become a cultural icon, a symbol of resistance against oppression. Schools teach about him, museums display artifacts related to his life, and his story is retold in countless books and documentaries. The man in the iron armor has transcended his mortal existence to become a legend. People both admire and dislike him. This duality is perhaps the most intriguing aspect of his legacy. To some, he is a folk hero, a champion of the underdog who stood up to a corrupt system. To others, he is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of taking the law into one's own hands. This split in public opinion ensures that Ned Kelly remains a topic of conversation, a figure who continues to evoke strong emotions and provoke thought. His story is complicated, full of poverty, unfairness, violence, and defiance. It is a narrative that mirrors the broader struggles of colonial Australia, a land grappling with its own identity and injustices. Ned Kelly's life serves as a lens through which we can examine the social and economic conditions of the time. His actions, whether seen as justified or criminal, were a response to the world he lived in, a world that was often brutal and unforgiving. He was a man of his time, living in the tough world of colonial Australia. The harsh landscapes, the struggle for survival, and the constant battle against authority were all part of the backdrop against which his life unfolded. Understanding Ned Kelly requires an understanding of the era he lived in, a time when the line between right and wrong was often blurred by circumstance and necessity. He wasn't perfect, but his actions, both good and bad, are remembered in Australia. His legacy is a testament to the complexity of human nature and the enduring power of storytelling. Ned Kelly's life was a series of contradictions, a blend of heroism and villainy that continues to captivate and confound. His story is a reminder that history is rarely black and white, but rather a spectrum of experiences and perspectives. The story of Ned Kelly, the man in iron armor, is still important today, reminding us of the power of stories and the fight for fairness and equality. His life and legacy serve as a powerful narrative about the human condition, the struggle for justice, and the complexities of morality. As we reflect on his story, we are reminded that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the tales we tell and the lessons we learn.